everybody, welcome to Hammer Down on the Market Scale Network. I'm your host, Mike Bush, and today I'm joined by Dan Lindsey, who is the founder of the Carrier Broker Summit. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Man, Dan. So I attended your last Carrier Broker or Broker Carrier Summit, and since then have had Adam Wingfield come join the show, and also I think I've touted the cool learnings on every episode since then. Man, walk walk me through it. What was the idea behind this event?
Yeah, so I've been in the brokerage world for, going on 15 years now. I've been in transportation in some form or fashion for over 20. And one of the things that keeps coming up is the tense relationship between freight brokers and trucking companies. A couple of years ago, I was looking for solutions to that relationship dynamic, and I wasn't really finding a lot. I found a lot of people complaining on social media, and a lot of anger and insults going back and forth. But last January, I just got tired of not having a solution to this problem and decided to start hosting events and seeing if brokers and carriers could actually come together in a productive way. And so far it has.
So let's kind of baseline this. What do you think is the number one or the top couple of issues between carriers and brokers who at the end of the day, if I really think about this, a shipper looks around and says, okay, I need to have goods moved. They probably rely on a broker because so many carriers are part of a small fleet. So brokers should aggregate carriers, approach the shipper and say, I've got you. Where is there an issue there, man?
Well, in any relationship, whether it's personal or professional, you have to have a foundation that's built on trust. If you don't have that, you your communication suffers, your service suffers, everything suffers. And for the longest time, brokers and carriers just flat out have not trusted each other. And so I think that's where the disconnect is basically founded, and all the other issues that come from that stem from that one issue.
So if you could wave a magic wand, what's the one thing you would do to promote more trust?
Get them in the same room, which is what we're trying to do at the summit. Because what we found is, especially in today's climate where everything is transactional, relationships are kind of going by the wayside, and they shouldn't. And that's especially true in logistics, where it's such an interpersonal relationship every step of the way. Getting together in the same room and having an actual business conversation, sharing a meal together, going through lane opportunities, working through RFPs together with your brokers, working through RFPs together with your carriers, as opposed to just guessing at what the load boards say you should pay and then expecting carriers to actually abide by your guesses. I think that's where it starts. If I could wave a magic wand, which we're trying to do with the summit, then that's where I would start.
So one of the things you mentioned load boards, and I've got to ask, man, are load boards good for the industry? Are they bad for the industry? What's your take?
Yes, they are good for the industry, and they are also. I'm not going to say they're bad for the industry, but they're a tool like anything else. Is a screwdriver good to install your shelf at home, or is it bad? Well, that depends on what you're trying to do with it. Um, so it's a tool. If you use it correctly, if you use it well, it can be a very helpful tool in getting you to where you want to go as a company. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who are using load boards for nefarious purposes. And so due diligence is required for anybody who's trying to get freight from the load boards.
Right. So you said one of my favorite words in this industry. You said relationship. What if what is the best way that I'm going to come from the broker side first, but what is the best way a broker should be approaching carriers in order to build a relationship?
I've said this for years. Brokers should treat their carriers as good, if not better, than they treat their customers. Because the bottom line is, as a brokerage, if you don't have carriers, you don't have a business because you don't have trucks. So the service that you're pushing to your customers, you can't have unless you have carriers who are willing to work with you. So if you're a broker out there and you are trying to enhance your relationship with your customers, it starts with having trusted partnerships with your carriers that can allow you the freedom and the flexibility to offer dedicated service at an enhanced service level to your customers.
Got it. Okay. If I go the opposite direction, I'm a carrier, I want to build a relationship with a broker. What are the couple of things I should be thinking about or doing?
Yeah, approach. I hate to use the customer word again, but approach your brokers as if they are your customers because they are. This is the only industry that I've been in where carriers will call their customers, the brokers, and just cuss them out. I've not had many of my vendors in any other industry call me up and call me an a-hole. I just haven't because they know they'll lose my business, right? Um, but routinely, carriers call up brokers and they just give them the business, and they let them have it, and they vent their frustrations. That's not a professional way to approach your customers. Yes, that broker might be not doing a good job when it comes to servicing you as their carrier, but they're still your customer. They're still the ones paying your company for your service. So treat them well. Take the high ground.
Let me ask you the question, man. Over the past, say, 10 years, and I'm using that number kind of specifically because it incorporates all of COVID, but it also goes back and it really focuses on when venture capital started to get into the digital brokerage phase. You're looking at the launch of Uber Freight, the launch of Convoy, companies like Next Trucking getting funding, and Cargomatic getting their funding and launching. Was the venture capital that was poured into this industry good for carriers and brokers, or do you think that was harmful?
I think it's yet to be seen, honestly. The digital freight brokerage model that the VC companies have all invested into. I think what it did was it accelerated changes that needed to be made on the technology side. That were, let's face it, trucking is way behind when it comes to integrating technology into their operations, both the broker side and especially the carrier side. So I think it did a lot of good when it came to forcing the conversation of improving technological efficiencies within trucking. What I think it did that it was an unintended consequence was it reduced the value of the human relationship in the minds of many shippers. Um, Shippers kind of got into the mindset where, oh, I can just push a button and I'll have a truck. Uh, yes, you can do that, but there is still a human element that needs to be taken into account. And I think, unfortunately, uh, that's been that's been missed, or that conversation has been kind of hijacked by the trend toward digitizing brokerages.
So that totally makes sense to me. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially coming off the summit, is, in order to be a broker that's scaling, which when you receive venture capital, there's an expectation you're going to grow and grow and grow. This is that's just is the reality of it. So to say, hey, listen, I'm going to grow from $1 million to 10 million to 100 million over the next 3 years, you of course have to, one, tack on new relationships, but two, you have to be willing to do so in an aggressive fashion. To me, that was actually a kind of a hurdle where it used to be, there were X number of brokers that had a footprint in Los Angeles or LA Long Beach. Now all of a sudden you had brokers trying to be everywhere, which to me was hurting those relationships because it was a race to see who had the most capacity. And you started to see, oh, I've got 100,000 trucks under control. I've got 50,000 trucking companies. I've got 9,000 MCs shared in order to, one, make your brokerage look bigger. But at the end of the day, a lot of those folks, a lot of those 10,000 MCs weren't receiving business from a broker. So all of a sudden you had one broker saying, I'm making $100 million. And that MC that signed up and took the time really isn't seeing anything out of that. Am I a little bit off there? Or just kind of, do you think that's tangential?
No, I think you're right. A lot of the brokers that have started in the last 4 or 5 years specifically, a lot of them have come from these larger operations, right? So the CH, the TQLs, they have the Coyote, they have experience in the industry, and they're used to the line of, oh, I have trucks in your area, which means I have 80,000 carriers in my network, and they think that that's a vanity metric, when in reality, one of the things that we've learned over on the broker side at Linkage is you have to know who you are before you start selling your services. And if you are a specialist in refrigerated produce, then you need to sell yourself as an expert in refrigerated produce. Don't start looking for flatbed customers and say, "Hey, I've got 50,000 carriers within 1,000 miles of you." That's fantastic, but you're not an expert in that field. I think a lot of times people need to just stick with what they're good at and be content to sit there for a while and then grow out from there, as opposed to opening up your brokerage, saying you have 100,000 carriers in your network and using 10 of them.
And one of the challenges I see there, one of the things I think about there is, if you're a refrigerated produce carrier, you're going to have seasonality, of course, but you're also kind of limiting yourself to the types of customers you can work with, given the venture capital structure where you're supposed to grow as quickly as possible. It feels like, as a broker, you're kind of fighting with yourself there.
Yeah, and I can empathize with that. At the same time, if you have expertise in a certain area and you actively search for customers that are outside of your area of expertise, those customers oftentimes end up costing you more than you make, because of the mistakes that are made, because of the learning curve that exists in learning new areas, not just in trucking, but any area of business. So you have to know who your ideal customer is, um, before you start expanding what that ideal customer looks like. Does that make sense? And you can do both at the same time. You can bring on a team that has varying levels of expertise. So we had a guy at Linkage for a while. He was an expert in produce. I was not an expert in produce. I've always been a van broker myself, and we had a guy who specialized in flatbed. So we truly could say that we did flatbed, reefer, and van, and basically depending on which shipper we were talking to, we just put them with the right specialist. That's very easily doable if you're trying to scale quickly.
Got it. Makes sense. So prior to Carrier Brokers or Broker Carrier Summit, and I will get that right one day because in my head it's always CBS to me. But yeah, so Carrier prior to Broker Carrier Summit, you know, your resume is kind of a who's who, where's where. You've been all over the place, man. Walk me through, kind of your career path to bring you to founding the summit.
Yeah, so my career path is a path paved with stones of chaos. I I think, and so I must work at freight, right? Yeah, so I started in logistics. So let me back up. My dad was a truck driver for UPS for 30 years. He drove a package truck, and I told him when I was 18 years old that I never wanted to get into logistics or freight, because his schedule was all over the place. He was always coming home late. I didn't want to do that. But here I am, uh, 22 years later, slinging away at freight. So in college, I ended up working for UPS as a preloader. So I did the 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift during college. Was in the Marine Corps Reserves at the time as well. Decided to go into the commercial world after college. Went to Roche Diagnostics. It's a pharmaceutical and lab equipment company here in Fishers, Indiana. Ended up doing logistics for them, scheduling appointments of lab equipment and reagents and all that. And then left the industry for a couple of years to try my hand at sales. I had never sold anything, so I figured I would go into life insurance. Spent 3 years there. I learned a lot about how to sell, how not to sell, and then ultimately realized that wasn't the industry for me, and came back into logistics. And I found an account executive job at TQL in 2013. Spent 6.5 years there. I loved my time at TQL. I always say I learned a lot of the good, a lot of the bad, a lot of the ugly while I was there. It was a really great training ground for I think the rest of what my career will look like. Uh, Decided to get out of that environment in 2019 and moved into the consulting world to expand my horizons and learn more about the industry. One of the things I did learn was that the consulting world is very, very slow, and at the time that was not my speed, and so I needed to get back into freight, get back into the hustle and the grind. And so in 2020, my partner and I launched Linkage Logistics, and it was on March 1st, 14 days before everything shut down and went crazy with COVID. And it's been a roller coaster ever since.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So, one quick question for you. Of course, earlier this week, saw an announcement on your LinkedIn that tickets are available for the next Broker Summit. Can you share some details about the upcoming event?
Absolutely. So October 23rd to the 25th, we are going to be descending on Fort Worth, Texas, at the Worthington Renaissance Hotel. We're going to be there for 3 days. It's going to be a fantastic time. We've built up a lot of momentum. There's a ton of interest uh, among brokers and carriers on what we're doing. And so the conversations that we're going to be having are ones that have evolved over the last 2 or 3 summits. And so we're going to have a lot of networking opportunities. Rumor is there's a speed dating portion involved. So brokers can meet carriers, the carriers can meet brokers, and everybody can meet different tech providers. It's going to be a great time. I'm excited about it. The venue is fantastic. It's Texas. Texas loves itself some Texas. So there's going to be some steaks. There's going to be some whiskey. There's going to be a lot of good conversations, hopefully late into the night. So it's going to be a great time.
And one question I ask, every guest is, if you could talk to your younger self or talk to a new or recent grad who's thinking about logistics and supply chain as a profession, what piece of advice would you give?
Think more, talk less.
Okay, love it.
I think sometimes, especially in freight, I tend to talk through my problems or talk through the problems that we're going through. And what I end up doing a lot of times is the people who are in the room with me think that I'm talking through the solutions and I'm actually just working through the problem. And so I think uh, keeping my mouth shut more and listening and waiting until I have a more fully developed idea, I think that would be one of the more helpful things.
Got it. Hey, if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about the Broker Carrier Summit, or just find out more about Dan Lindsey, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, so brokercarriersummit.com is our website. It's going through an overhaul at the moment, but it should still be up. If you want to reach out to me directly, my email is contact@brokercarriersummit.com. I'd love to have a conversation and answer any questions anyone may have.
Dan Lindsey, thanks for being a guest on the show, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you.